What's up, gamers? For today, we're gonna be talking about a new card game for this channel, One Piece. So I have been a fan of One Piece, anime, and manga for quite a long time now, and here in Japan, the One Piece card game, it's really famous. So I think it's a good chance to show to you guys one of my decks. It's Nami. So same as in Magic the Gathering, I'm playing blue in One Piece also. So Nami, it's basically like a laboratory maniac. If you don't have any cards in your library, then you win the game. So how I built this deck, it has a lot of defense, like protecting your leader, and then cards that loot, and basically cards that draw more cards. So without further ado, this is my deck, and I'll show you a sample game of how I play this deck. So first things first, I'm running 3 copies of Buggy, because I'm expecting a slower format. Most of the time, we want to play second. And in some cases that our opponent wants to play us first, I wanted to have like more cards that I can play on the first turn. I am using 3 copies of Buggy. This is pretty standard. A playset of Kaya, a playset of Mr. 1. So Mr. 1 is very useful in this deck because in the late game, this is where Mr. 1 usually stands out, wherein we can get back multiple Gavels and keep on milling our deck. When we're expecting a lot of reds, for example, Nojiko might be too slow for that because red will probably just recast and just rush us. But since I'm expecting a slower format, a lot of mid-range decks, playing Nojiko made more sense to me rather than playing more 2k counters. Then I think this is pretty standard. 4 copies of Zeph. Most of the time we just want to bounce Kaya or Mr. 1. And Zeph can also act as a finisher because we can just attach a Dawn to this, and if we hit our opponent, we mill 7 cards. Then as a deck tech, I'm using 1 copy of Usopp, basically a 5th copy of the Mill 7 ability of Zeph. My build is still an event-heavy build, so these are the events that I used. So I'm playing 3 copies of Brick Fist, then I'm playing 4 copies of Love Love Beam or Mero Mero Mellow, 4 copies of Desert Spada, so still 4 copies of the Usopp's Rubber Band. It's one of the all-stars in this deck, Gavel. So it's a 1 cost, so you can return it back with Mr. 1. It gives plus 4,000. You can discard cards that you don't need. Like for example, Impel Down All-Stars. This is basically a dead card when you draw this. So it's a good card to discard with Gavel. And you can mill your library while defending. So Impel Down All-Stars, we can't cast this card basically, but we just want this to be in our life. So the trigger for this is all that matters. So the trigger is you draw 2 cards. So it's basically the 5th to 8th copies of your Sanji's Pilaf. So Sanji's Pilaf, a very good card. It's a 3-drop, draw 2 cards, and then as for the trigger, you can still draw 2 cards. So this is a very good card for Nami. So we have 8 triggers basically that draws us 2 cards. Then last but not the least, a playset of Deathwink. So Deathwink is a very strong card. It gives plus 6k counter. But we don't want multiple copies of this card in our hand. We do want to play this card as the last card from our hand. That way we can draw 2 cards. So this is my deck profile for Nami, and this is what I'm currently using in the tournaments that I play here in Tokyo. If you like this deck profile, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So there's East Blue in our channel name, and Nami is basically an East Blue character. That's all for the deck profile. Let's see some games. Okay, so we're playing OP-06 hero here, Yamato. Always play second if we have the chance for Nami. So let's Kaya here, discard. Since we have multiple copies of Zeph and Gavel, let's discard those. Pass the turn to our opponent. With this, we have 1 open Dawn. We can Gavel or Spada depending on what our opponent does here. So usually Yamato in the early game, he usually just put all the dons, but here our opponent casts something and opponent just attacks for 6, so we can just Spada here. So all these 3, I don't really need them for now. So just bottom that. So we drew a Nojiko, but let's just buggy get a Deathwink. And we can end the turn here with 3 Dawn open. We can Deathwink or we can Love Beam or Gavel. Opponent will drop a Nami, so we don't want Banish. We definitely need to block here because we want to draw the cards if we take some damage. So let's Gavel. We drew a Pilaf. Let's just draw 2 cards. And the turn, we got a second Deathwink. We don't want this as much as possible, but with Yamato, multiple Deathwinks can still be usable because they usually just go all in. So 7k. We can Love Beam here, but multiple copies of Deathwing is not really good, so I opted to use Deathwing. $5k Nami, we can just discard for the 1k counter for Zeph. So let's draw. We can just basically bounce Holy here. But first, let's buggy. We'll get another copy of the Brick Fist. Then we can just bounce Holy. We do have a Love Beam. The opponent goes for 8k. So Love Beam will send up to 9k, and we drew another Deathwing. So at this point, we can just take some damage here. Spada, let's trigger, draw 2 and discard 1. Drew another Pilaf. So let's get a Gavel, then Pilaf. So this is where I really like Mr. 1, because late game where our library becomes like very little, we can get multiple copies of Gavel from our graveyard. And Gavel can do a lot of things for this deck. So if we have multiple Deathwings, for example, or if we have Impel Down All-Stars in our hand, we don't want them, so we can just discard them using Gavel. So let's trash here, 12k, 13. So with a lot of cards in our hand, we can safely at least try to avoid the attacks from Yamato. At this point, I think I'm okay with taking some damage. So we drew another Impel Down All-Stars, but we do have Gavel in our hand, so it's okay. Let's bounce Mr. 1, get another Gavel next turn. Or maybe we can just drop Mr. 1 here, get a Gavel. We have 4 Dons open. We have 16 cards in the deck at this point and 3 life. I think I like where I am currently. So 12k attack here for our opponent. We can double Gavel. So I can discard a Pilaf here or Usopp. But since I have Zeph already in play, so I can probably just discard Usopp. Usopp doesn't have a 1k counter, so it's pretty much a dead card in our hand. So let's resolve this. We can Love Beam, and other than that, we can just take some damage. So Love Love Beam, we draw a Brick Fist. If our opponent will attack, just take. We drew a Kaya here. We can just still take that. Deathwing. Up to this point, let's just draw 2 cards. We can currently first we can start removing attacks for our opponent. So I didn't realize here that we are already in 8 cards in our deck, and just right there I saw it. So we can just go all in with Zeph here, leave 1 Dawn for Kaya. So our opponent, this is a 12k attack with 5 cards in our opponent's hand. So I'm pretty much confident with this attack. So it went through, we have 1 card in our hand, and we'll win the game by casting Kaya. So this is how I play Nami. So thank you very much for watching up to this point. See you in the next video.